We want to welcome everyone to the Good Trouble Equity Talk. Today, I am your host, Dennis Carpenter. I am super excited. This is being brought to you by Aspirational Insights Consulting, LLC. And tonight, we're going to dig into the state of policing in the Black community. We're excited to have our panel with us. We have Mr. Jeffrey Hatcher. He's going to give himself a deeper introduction here in a second. We have Laura McDonald from More Squared. We're super excited to have her. We have Dr. Roderick Sams and Sheriff Alfonso Williams. He just called in. He'll be joining the show here in a second, but we don't want to lose any time with this great panel, so we're going to get started. Laurie, tell the people a little bit more about who you are, what you do.
So I run an organization called Metro Organization for Racial and Economic Equity here in Kansas City, and we're a part of a national network called the Gamaliel Network that does community organizing primarily through the faith community, and we're in 49 cities around the nation. As the executive director, I act as a community organizer and spend a lot of time on the ground organizing various movements. That's how you and I met, Dr. Carpenter.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for the work you do in the Metro Kansas City area. Officer Hatcher, talk to the people.
Yes, Jeff Hatcher, law enforcement officer here in Miami-Dade County for a small municipality here in Miami-Dade County. Been in law enforcement now for approximately 14 years. Do a lot of community events with kids and things of that nature. So I met Dr. Carpenter many years ago. Him and I grew up together and went to the same elementary, middle, and high school, as well as Dr. Sams and Sheriff Alfonso Williams and I also grew up right across the street from each other for many years.
Absolutely. So, hopefully he'll be joining us shortly. Dr. Rocky Sams.
My brother. So coming to you from Atlanta, pleasure to be here and joining this esteemed group. Very worthwhile conversation. So I've spent almost 30 years in education. First 20 years as a teacher, coach, assistant principal, elementary, secondary level. I've spent the last 10 years in business development and consulting. I work for an organization called New Leaders, which focuses on leadership development in some of the largest urban centers across the country, in partnership to try to build capacity for leaders. And so it's exciting work. We're excited about the things that we're doing, and definitely look forward to engaging in, again, a very worthwhile topic.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. You know, we had a show that was lined up last week in which we talked about the whole issue of African-American business owners and leaders and how they are managing during the COVID crisis. But it would have come across as extremely tone deaf given the events that were unfolding relative to Ahmaud Arbery during that time. So we kind of touched on that topic very briefly, but it was clear from our viewers that they wanted to go deeper into this topic of policing and the Black community. We're going to be waiting for Sheriff Williams. He's going to be joining us pretty soon. This is Aspirational Insights Consulting and the Good Trouble Equity Talk, but we're going to start it off. We're going to kick it to you, Officer Hatcher. I know my perspective as an African-American male that gets to live in these United States. I know my perspective of law enforcement in the Black community, but give me an officer perspective. If someone came up to you and said, Officer Hatcher, what is the state of law enforcement in the Black community right now? What would you tell those folks?
I would have to say to those folks that policing right now is tough in any community. Law enforcement has changed tremendously in any community, whether it's a Black community or predominantly white community. I would say that we have come a long ways in law enforcement, and we still need to make some improvements. It's some things that maybe we can do different. We always, in my respected department, we always challenge the community to get involved, come and talk to us and ask questions and just get involved. And that's one of the big things that I would like to see.
You want to see the community more involved. So if you had to talk about the relationship between the Black community and law enforcement right now, from your vantage point, how would you define that relationship?
The relationship, I would say, it just all depends. You know, as an African American man myself, and as a law enforcement officer, sometimes, you know, we get beat up pretty bad because, you know, I don't know how many times I've been called, you know, for, you know, and I hate to use this word, but, you know, I'm a sellout because I'm in law enforcement, and I get that from the Black community. So, you know, I didn't forget how to be a Black man. I'm still a Black man. I'm a law enforcement officer, but I'm still a Black man. And I would think that the relationship is, you know, it's a little rocky, but it's been rocky for a long time. And that's why when you and I spoke, I said, Dr. Carpenter, let's have this conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Sams, given your experiences as a Black male, son of the South, what do you feel is the state of law enforcement? What's the state of policing in the Black community from your vantage point?
I think, great question, by the way. I think it's a cross section of a lot of variables. One of the biggest variables is there was a time, and I know that there's been a lot of community policing efforts that are happening all across the country. But I think there's a disconnect with the number of individuals who police communities where they don't live or have strong connections to. You know, there was a time when we were all growing up. I mean, we grew up in rural Georgia, but we all grew up around not only the teachers that taught at our schools, we went to church with them, or we saw them in the grocery store. Same thing with police officers. We saw them as an extension and a connection to our community versus someone who's just coming in to police it. So I think as we start framing this conversation around how we can improve the relations, I'm not saying every police officer needs to live in the community, but you need to at least have a connection to it beyond your occupation or beyond your work. You know, volunteer for recreation department activities. I know Brother Hatchett does some amazing work with his basketball program and some other nonprofits that he does. So infusing yourself in the community shows that you're connected to it and not just policing it. But we also have a responsibility as citizens as well to hold each other accountable and to make sure that we take ownership for the communities that we want to have. And if we are doing a disservice to ourselves, we have to be willing to call each other out on those kinds of things. And so, but do it in a way that's respectful and honorable, of course. But that's a duality that I see having to happen. As a Black man, you know, those come at a cross section as well, because on one hand, you know, I try to do the right things. I try to carry myself the right way. I try to, you know, obey and follow the things as I should, you know, and be respectful. But at the same time, you also want to maintain a certain level of understanding that, you know, I'm still a man, and there's still certain things that I should be afforded just like any other human is afforded. So, absolutely. So we have to make sure that we can speak to those things and speak those things honestly and truthfully. And I think that's where it gets disconnected a lot of times.
Well, I tell you what, we're in an interesting place. We got over 50 people viewing on the main. I'm sure we got watch parties going on. I got Sheriff Alfonso Williams on the phone. He's saying he's on the site. He can't get in. I think he's an integral part of this conversation. I think he has to be a key part of this conversation today. So we're going to have to make a decision here about how we maybe pivot to get him on this call. We have a sitting sheriff in Georgia, a place where we have seen some egregious things happening of late. I think that we'll miss an opportunity if we don't get Sheriff Williams on this line, but it's going to cause me to have to pause this broadcast to get him on. What do you all think as a panel?
He's critical.
Yeah, he's very critical
to the conversation. Folks, give us 5 minutes to bring the sheriff on. He just pulled up to his office. He's having trouble getting logged on. We must bring him to the conversation. Laura McDonald, you're going to be up next. We're bringing the sheriff on. Give us a couple of minutes.